As we progress in the whole like Web 1, Web 2, Web 3 conversation, and also the read, write, own conversation, it very much gives an aesthetic of like evolution. Like we're layering on new abilities onto the internet, and as a result, the internet expresses itself uniquely based off of the skills, the abilities that we have during the particular phase of the internet. And so, like, you know, own doesn't imply not having read and write, right? It's like a new skill on
for
top.
sure. No, definitely it's additive. Yeah, it's definitely additive.
But also at the same time, the blockchain world we're not trying to take all of the properties and the characteristics of corporate networks into our future internet. Like we are actually intentionally trying to leave some of the properties behind. So while it is like an evolution, a progression of the skill tree of the internet, we are also not totally taking everything with us. Do you have a mental model for us for as we develop more abilities, as the internet grows in sophistication, each one of these abilities is layered on the others, but we're also leaving some properties behind. How should we think about like understanding this arc?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Like I would say, like there's some clearly great things about the Facebooks, Googles, et cetera, right? Which is they brought mostly generally free services to 5 billion people. Right. And, they're very high performant. They have great user experiences. As I said, they're mostly free. They have very high quality software design. A lot of those things are important and, should be maintained. I think it's very important. I think one of the things we're kind of missing in Web3 is feature and functionality parity with Web2. I think we need to get to that. We can talk about that at some point if you want, and that means, transaction costs and user experience and finality time and just all those kinds of things. So they've done a lot of good stuff there. I think that to me, the big problems with the Web2 model is one, that these 5 actors in the middle take all the money and don't share it with the people that actually create the content and do the work. Just to give you another data point, Spotify, there are, I think by their own stats, 14,000 out of 8 million musicians make $50,000 a year or more, which is roughly the average American salary. So, it's like 99+% don't make enough to live on. And is this a problem because people don't like music? No. Is it a problem people don't like to pay for music? No. It's a problem because you have these giant intermediaries in the middle, Spotify, the labels, everyone else taking all the money, right? And so I think this architecture of all the money and control. I also think, like I don't get much into politics, and I'm not highly political myself, but this idea that a bunch of product managers in San Francisco should make decisions about who has access to these critical global infrastructure. To me, it's like, imagine if AT&T decided who got to make phone calls. Like, it just sounds like a really bad fucking idea. Like, shouldn't that be something that's done by the government or by some kind of like democratically controlled system? So just the control and there's all sorts of other, like, there's a thing going on TikTok now. I have a friend who's a TikTok creator, and what TikTok has decided is a few people got too big. They got like 100 million followers. And so they're deliberately dialing down their reach and then dialing up, right? Because any business doesn't want to get too dependent on a few quote unquote suppliers. And so they're constantly playing games where they're turning dials. Someone builds a business and they turn the dials and they take away that business, or they make them pay more to kind of promote themselves to get back up. A lot of the social networks, I think the next wave we're about to see now is basically you can't link out from social networks. We're already seeing this somewhat on Twitter and Facebook. Mm-hmm. They're trying to keep you there like completely siloed in those networks. So if you link out just a web link, like if I tweet something right now and I say, hey, and click here to learn more, that tweet will get demoted, and that happens on most social networks now. And I think that will accelerate, and you'll basically end up with these 5 silos that don't link out, as an example. And so anyways, all of these things these are very important decisions about how our online lives are structured and controlled, and they should not be controlled by 5 companies. They should be controlled by communities, the way the first year of the web was. So that part we definitely got to get rid of, I think. But we don't need to. What we shouldn't lose is the wonderful user experiences. Ideally, very low cost or free or freemium or whatever the model might be for these things. Keep the internet accessible. More people have internet access now than access to running water. I think that's a testament to the amazing success of these free services. A lot of it, by the way, is due to open source software. The fact that all software is essentially free today. You can get an Android phone for $10 because all the software is free. It's Linux. we don't want to lose that. Like, it's very important to keep, the internet accessible but I think all of these, essentially the way the money and the power is allocated is just horribly wrong. And it's going to get more and more acute, and people are going to figure it out. And by the way, AI is going to accelerate this. I'm a big fan of AI. I'm very excited about it, but it's a centralizing technology, right? It rewards companies with big stockpiles of data, capital, and compute. And it will further entrench this and further accelerate it. And I don't see any other counterbalancing force on the horizon but blockchains. I challenge people to come up with something.
That's exactly how I see Web3 as the next step from Web2. And maybe it's, I'll throw this to you, maybe Web2 was also a reaction to Web1 in the same way that Web3 is a reaction to Web2, whereas Web1 was like clunky and for nerds and for people who could deal with the UX limitations that the internet had. And then we made Web2 in order to deal with those problems, giving us a new set of problems. And now Web3, you kind of, maybe it's, the problems of Web3 are trying to solve the economic problems of Web2 or the value capture problems of Web2. Is it fair to say that each web phase of the web is a reaction to the previous one?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. I mean, with Web 2, like the kind of move fast and break things, like it was very hard to move fast with protocols, right? Protocols, you require consensus, you have committees. You couldn't do subsidization, so just like the example I gave with video. So 2005 was an important year because that was the year that broadband penetration in the US started to surpass, narrowband penetration. And so people could use video. And the protocol versions of the open internet versions of it were clunky and they were expensive. And so it seemed like I was for it at the time. I was like, well, of course, why don't we have a company do it and they can subsidize it and they'll get paid later because there'll be a big network and they'll be able to run ads or something. And it seemed like the right trade. We just hadn't seen how the movie fully played out, right? We didn't see how, as they got bigger, they would consolidate more, they would extract more, they would close down more, right? And so I go through this in the book. There's a section I call the attract-extract cycle, which I think every network, or I argue, I think pretty strongly, and evidence suggests it's true, that all networks kind of go through this life cycle where they start off kind of attracting users and what I call complements, which are, creators and developers and others. And then over time, once they get to a certain kind of level of market share, their incentives switch and they start to sort of squeeze more and more out of those participants. And so, I think in the mid 2000s, it seemed like a good idea to make these, to have companies step in. They could move much faster. They could subsidize. They could rapidly iterate on the products. But then I think once we saw the issues, in the early 2010s, I think people in the tech community, should have reacted to that and sort of said, hey, this isn't the right thing. My view is a lot of people in the tech community just, were benefiting from it. As Mark Andreessen likes to say, we used to be the pirates, now we're the Navy. Like they became the Navy, and it was a good system for them. And but to me, it was like, is that worth the trade? We lost all of the kind of original ideals of the internet. It wasn't worth it to me.
If you enjoyed all of that, then you'll absolutely love the Bankless newsletter. Join over 300,000 fellow readers, all for free. Click below to sign up.